Hello, Gold viewers from around the world. I'm Kristen Schwartz, licensed midwife and MC for Gold Learning. And here I'm today chatting with Dr. Jane Hanley and Mark Williams about their upcoming presentation titled The Importance of Fathers' Mental Health. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Jane Hanley. Hello, Jane.
Hello there.
It's so lovely to have you here with us today, and we're very excited about the upcoming presentation that you're doing with Mark here. But before we get into that, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your professional journey?
Sure. Well, I have to thank you very much indeed for allowing us to talk to you. It's such a great pleasure for us. Just to tell you a little bit about my journey, I suppose. I've probably been doing this for longer than I care to remember, 35 years, certainly with mothers in postnatal depression. And I became very interested in it and looked into the reasons as to why mothers got depressed, what were their attitudes towards it. And it actually first started out in the Middle East when I was a sister on a medical ward, and I found that a lot of the men that got depressed actually went back to their villages for treatment and rejected the Western medicine. And I won't go into too much detail about how they got treated, but it was certainly a different ideology to the one we practiced in the West. And that got me thinking really about how people interpreted depression in particular. And then I recognized that there were lots of women who were becoming depressed in the postnatal period following the birth of their baby. And that took my interest in so much so that in fact that's what I based my thesis on for my PhD. And worked a lot with it, and particularly with the Marseille Society, which is an international society for perinatal mental health. And there were so many facets actually to the work that I did. But the reason I became interested in fathers is I happened to recognize that while I was talking to women who were postnatally depressed, they were then talking about how their husbands were affected by it. And I sort of thought, well, hang on a minute here, we're talking about women who are depressed, but there isn't anything I've read on the way in which men behave when they're depressed, or what treatments there are, or even what screening there is for men, or assessment processes. That's why I became interested in men, culture, and women.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. That certainly is very interesting here. And before we hear from Mark, I want to just quickly know, without going into too much detail, because we want to hear, we want, of course, our delegates to come to the presentation, listen to the presentation. But what do you hope our delegates will take away from it?
I hope that it will give them a greater insight into fathers and the way that they behave when they're depressed, and recognize really how important a father is certainly in the relationship with a mother, and particularly with a child, and ultimately society as a whole.
Thank you so much, Jane, for sitting down here with me and chatting about your presentation and giving us a little background here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
And now we also will hear from Mark Williams, who is also presenting in this presentation on the importance of fathers' mental health. Hello, Mark.
Hiya, how are you doing? You okay?
Good. It's so lovely to have you here with us today. So now I'll ask you also to share a little bit about your background and why you got interested in the topic.
Yeah, I was into communication for years before I got into mental health, but it wasn't until my wife obviously went through postnatal depression, and I'm depression myself, that I went into training in mental health in general, really. So yeah, it's from a personal experience, and then I set up an organisation called Fathers Reaching Out. It was, like I said, to support fathers with their partners with postnatal depression. But I think it was down to my communication skills and listening skills. I found that the dads were suffering sometimes more than the mothers, and but they were keeping it in, and they were only getting help at crisis points. So yeah, it's mostly my knowledge has come from, I think, over 2,000 dads I've actually spoken to via social media, groups, email, phone calls, not just in the UK, but overseas as well. So yeah, it's really important that we need to talk about all parents, really.
That's absolutely wonderful. And for you, this is such a personal experience because you went through that as your own, in your own life. So I think having you both here, Dr. Jane Hanley and you, Mark Williams, to talk about the topic and bringing it kind of together also, the clinical background, but also the father's perspective, I think that works really well together for the presentation. So I'm so happy that you could make it to be here with us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for asking us. I just hope it's okay because it's the first time we've actually done the online conference.
Oh,
so,
you're going to be wonderful, and our listeners will be looking forward to this. And Mark, before I let you go quickly, too, from your perspective, from your experience and your work, what is it that you are hoping our delegates will take away from this presentation?
Yeah, it's one thing mostly is just ask Dad about his mental health. Really look at the sign, look at him, ask him, even if it's a 5-minute conversation, ask him about his mental health, because that could be the case of him actually, by asking that question, not only saving a relationship, it can actually save his life as well, So, like I said early on in the presentation, a lot of these men actually go on years later to actually take their life, sadly. But so it's very important. Just make sure you ask all parents, same-sex couples, everyone. All parents got to be asked about their mental health.
Very good. Thank you for that. That was my great pleasure sitting down here with Dr. Jane Hanley and Mark Williams to chat about the upcoming presentation, The Importance of Father's Mental Health. This presentation is part of the Mental Health and the Perinatal Lecture Pack by Gold. And to find out more about this presentation and the other presentations in this lecture pack, please visit goldlearning.com. Thank you, everyone, for listening, and bye-bye.